Hey everyone, Donny here. Wednesday afternoon, 2:30 p.m. Swedish, Stockholm, Sweden, broadcasting to the world. I'm so happy to be here. So happy to see you out there for this Wednesday broadcast. My Innovation Fika, my innovation coffee break that I broadcast every Wednesday, 2:30 p.m. here on LinkedIn and on YouTube. So make sure to bookmark and make the coffee and order the cinnamon buns. Roll out the TV. That's an old reference for the old kids. And joining me for my innovation coffee break, always with a fun person, good ideas, sometimes some cool tech as well, sometimes a Kinder Egg of all three. But before we get going with today's guest, I will shortly just say, yes, of course, my name is Donny. I post daily on entrepreneurship, innovation, startups, and inspiration on LinkedIn and Instagram. I also broadcast live every Wednesday, 2:30 p.m. on Wednesdays. And then, of course, on Monday mornings, I have this crazy Monday morning greeting. So follow me on LinkedIn and Instagram for that. If you want to be notified, make sure to subscribe to my newsletter, innovationfika.com. Go to innovationfika.com and subscribe to my newsletter. And every Monday, you'll get a newsletter with last week's link to the recording, the coming week's show, and a post from last week. As I said, I post every day as well on the same subject. This week's content theme is diversity and equality. So all the posts are about that. My guest is about that as well. But before that, a new thing this week. If you're in Sweden, you can, let's say over here, you can text Fika to 711140, 71140, as I say in Swedish. Text Fika to that number and you'll get a text back saying, hi, here's a link to my newsletter. And then, boop, you're online and everything is fantastic. So we create fantasticness together. But enough of me, enough of that. Here we go. Diversity, equality. That sounds like the start of a really bad song. In the studio, backstage, here she is, the one, the only, the incredible Salem Yohannes.
Hello.
Hello. Well, let's do this. There we go. I can see them. Wonderful. Thank you so much for being here today. I am super happy to have you with me. Not in the studio, but at least online with me today.
Yes.
Really happy to see you. So much fun.
Thank you for having me.
Well, I mean, it's as I always say regarding these innovation fikas, it's an incredible opportunity for me to reach out to really cool people and friends and say, hey, let's have a cup of coffee together. And then we'll invite the rest of the world to have it with us as well. So that's where we are today. But if people don't know you as well as I do, if I go, hey, Salem, who are you? You work as a diversity consultant?
Yes.
What is a diversity consultant?
Well, in my case, a diversity consultant, or rather, I would say a consultant within human rights, specifically focusing on equality connected to ethnicity and skin color. So I am an independent agent that works to educate, conduct research, and advise organizations and companies in matters that concern equality connected to ethnicity and race specifically, but also other areas.
Yep. And you actually have Salem Yohannes, your homepage there as well, right? SalemYohannes.com. That's exactly. So if you want to know more about Salem, go to her homepage, connect with her on LinkedIn. That's yes. So we're talking this. See, too many questions are trying to get out of my mouth at the same time.
The excitement is real. I love it.
I know. It's crazy. I can't believe I have you here with me. And we've already got comments coming in. This is great. Hey, Kate. Wonderful. Good to see
Hi,
you.
Kate
from South Africa is online. That's super cool. No, I was going to say that the whole thing with diversity tends to be a bit skewed because we have this whole debate now going on in the startup world where I work as well. You know, it's male, female, and women aren't getting enough money in the startup world, but then we're still only talking about gender, right? And
Yes.
I mean, I don't mean to diminish the gender issue, but I'm saying that we're only talking about gender. But I mean, I know after speaking to you, I know that there are now seven, right? Grounds for discrimination, right?
Yes, of course.
When we're talking about diversity. So which are the 7 grounds? What are they? The seven.
So in Sweden, according to the Discrimination Act, we have 7 grounds of discrimination. So one is sex, and then we have transgender identity or expression. We have ethnicity, which also skin color is included in. We have religion and other faiths, disability, sexual orientation, and age. So these are the 7 grounds for discrimination we have here in Sweden. But as you were saying, Dani, that is a very interesting reflection that the diversity discussion today tends to have a very narrow understanding of diversity, where we emphasize sex as the specific ground for discrimination, but we have 6 more of them to take into account. And I think that we have some issues with that.
We do. I mean, we do. No, but we do. And I think that I know I wrote a post today on LinkedIn about, I mean, since every post this week is about the subject. And one thing I picked up, and in our conversations as well, was that, you know, it's not really about if you want to work with diversity or not. I mean, it is, right? I mean, face it, we are, I mean, you need to work, you need to actively work with it, and you need to talk about it. And that's probably, I know that one of the things that you say is that one of the biggest problems is that we don't talk about it. We talk around it, and we maybe sort of have some kind of opinion about it, but we don't really talk about it. Right?
Yeah, when it comes to diversity, sometimes we take for granted what it means, or what people means, or what I mean by talking about diversity. But actually, we have different concepts and different notions of what we're talking about when we say diversity. For instance, a person can talk about gender and talk about the equal rights and opportunities of men and women, but another person might talk about diversity as differences in age, or differences in mental or physical abilities. Another person can talk about, for instance, skin color. So we tend to go into this very broad subject and think that we all are on the same page, but we're actually thinking about many different things. And that's why I think the Discrimination Act is a good foundation for us to have a similar concept of what it means to talk about diversity, and which groups that actually historically and today are marginalized and that are vulnerable, and we have to take them into account, all of them at the same time.
I mean, I interviewed Katrine Marsal a couple of months back. She wrote a book called in Swedish, it's called Att uppfinna världen. The English title that's being released now is called The Mother of Invention. And she's talking a lot about the gender, you know, the why women have been a part of history, but they are not allowed to be a part of history in the history books. You know, and she also mentions, I mean, she briefly mentions in the end of the book, not only women, but also women with disabilities. And it's like you have the inner circle, and I'm not going to say, you know, there's an inner circle of privileged individuals, and then for every sort of layer you add out, you know, it becomes more and more difficult. I mean, and I can only talk about from my perspective, because as in people trying to raise money in the startup world, right? It's if you're everything in the right place as well, geography. I mean, if you're from and you've gone to the same right schools, and you're the right, right color, right age, right school, right everything, and right gender, you know, it's kind of easy to raise money. And then, but and then every hurdle you add, every circle out from that you add, it gets harder. And so if you're like a woman of color from the outskirts of wherever with a strange name, from a foreign country, I mean, in Sweden as well, I mean, this goes for Europe, I mean, as well, it's not only a bit harder, it's like, you know, it's exponentially harder.
Yeah, you're talking about, there's so many layers to an individual. And for me, for instance, like, I'm not only a woman, but I'm also a Black person, and I'm also kind of young, born and raised in area that is like social economical, very hurt here in society, and there's a lot of negative ideas and concepts about areas such as mine, Bergen. So some people say that it's harder to, when you have all these barriers in front of you, it's harder to design your own life or reach success or gain all that money for that business you want to start or whatever. So I tend to see it as we need to see this diversity with many layers, and that the layers also coexist and also can strengthen or might give you less good chances in life or in success or whatever.
Yeah.
So, but by being attentive and seeing all of them at the same time, we can also take active measures. That is my stance in this. So we have to talk about them, all of them.
Yeah, but isn't it kind of strange that we're okay to talk about some things, but we have a very hard time talking about other things, and it's different for different cultures, of course.
Yeah.
But I mean, of the set, we mentioned the 7 grounds for discrimination, at least in Sweden, right?
Yeah.
And the interesting thing is, and you please comment on this as well, because I feel that some things are like okay to talk about. And we've come to the point when we can at least start discussing that females aren't getting the same chances that males are. Age is okay. We can talk about that, but we're not doing so much about it. We have a huge age discrimination thing going on, but don't get me started on color. I mean, that in Sweden, you don't talk about color or ethnicity. I mean, what's your take on that?
I share your vision, your view here, because I also feel that there is an unwillingness to talk about skin color, to even take it in your mouth and verbalize that there can be structural barriers or problems in society when it comes to skin color. We have this notion called color blindness, which is a culturally instituted idea here in Sweden, that we praise people for being colorblind, or it's a good thing to not see color because we're past that. That's what we're thinking. But what we're actually doing by saying that we are colorblind or acting in a colorblind way is that we are downplaying people's lived experiences. We are erasing structural inequality connected to skin color, and we are actually hindering the proactive work. And when it comes to combating discrimination in the labor market, for instance, or what you have. So it's actually it's counterproductive to be colorblind in this instance if we're serious about working for equality. So there is some inconsistency here, which some people are not willing to face, this type of notion, thinking that colorblindness is the way to go. So my question is, how would you argue for colorblindness being a good approach to fighting inequality? How is that a good approach? That is my question, because we know that the work for gender equality, even though we have a lot more to do, we've come much further. We have statistics, we can compare, we can put in active measures, we can evaluate it, and then we do it all over again. And that's why we've come further. But when it comes to, for instance, skin color, we actually think that the best efficient way to combat discrimination or promote equal opportunities and rights is by being colorblind. And that is my question.
And that's a super interesting thing there, because you just said something here now. Because what you said was, and I'm gonna break it down to, and you said that, but one of the reasons that we are now talking about gender inequality is that we've managed to measure it, and we can prove for a fact that females get 1% of venture capital. 1% of venture capital go to, and that the only reason we can see that is because we measure it. So how can we even start talking about what other inequalities there are if we don't measure the actual grounds for inequality? I mean, we can just sort of imagine that it's harder or not. So it's
And
really, really.
I find this so funny because people tend to set goals for their diversity inclusion work. They just set random goals, but they don't actually assess and evaluate their situation. They don't map, they don't do surveys of that kind. So what kind of relevant goals are you setting? How are they efficient? What results will they give you? How is that even? For me, it's like I
Yeah, but
laugh
but,
when I
but this,
hear
this,
this kind of initiatives.
but now you're being difficult here, because now you're actually saying that we actually have to measure more stuff than only age and gender when we cross in, the fill in the forms for the employee thing. Sort of age, I know that I can. But then again, why should I want to put my age here? Why is that important? Why are we measuring age? I mean, that in itself, by just, so if we're not measuring the other things, why are we measuring age and gender kind of thing? So
Yeah, the
it's
logic has to be. We need to be consistent in our
yes,
logic. Either we do it, and then we do it for all, or for me personally, we don't do it. But if we don't do it, then we need to have a logic or a thinking behind of why we take that
yeah,
action. But
yeah,
for me, it's like I find it very hard to follow this specific logic for one ground, but
yeah,
not for the other ground. Since we know historically these are marginalized
yeah,
groups, we know for a fact that they have less chances, less
yeah,
opportunities,
yeah, yeah,
and space to create their lives as they wish. So
yeah,
for me, it's problematic to have
yeah.
that approach for one thing and
Sure.
not for the other.
And then so many things are going crisscross in my head here. But I mean, it just some paradoxes are, like in Sweden, one of the most sensitive things you can ask somebody is, and how much money do you make? I mean,
Mm,
that's you don't talk about salaries in Sweden. However, anybody in Sweden will say to me, sort of, where are you from? Where are you
mm,
born? What's your origin? And actually, for the viewers here, Salem is actually more Swedish than I am, because I'm actually the first generation immigrant into this country. So, but that's okay in Sweden to say sort of, where are you from? Like, you don't look like us. Where are you from? That's okay in Sweden. But when you go to the US, you can fill in a form. It's ethnicity, everything like that, and that's okay. And you never get the question, where are you from in the US? Because like everybody's from somewhere else anyway, more or less. So,
yeah.
and it's just such a really, really weird thing, how paradoxical we are in which things we are sort of trained to think are okay, but still the question, where are you from, in a social setting, we feel it's okay, but we'd never sort of put it on a piece of paper on an employees when it comes to like ethnicity or skin color or something like that, even though, as we're saying now, I mean, number one is you have to start getting data. I mean,
Mm.
get the data straight. That's the first step, right? Start talking about it and getting the data out there. So it's
Yeah, I would say like first of all, we need to concretize what we mean with diversity and what do we mean by being inclusive or being diverse. For instance, the concept of inclusion uh, uh, talks about one center and one periphery.
yeah,
So there has to be one in group and there has to be some kind of out group to even be inclusive. So for me, that's also a problematic concept in itself. To there is a idea to cement the center and cement the periphery, and for me, that has equality as the goal. I would not say that being inclusive is the best strategy to go towards equality. So I would start by problematizing that concept. But nonetheless, we have to talk about diversity. What do we mean by that? What do you mean? I mean this. Okay. What concepts and meaningful words do we need in order to engage in this conversation in a fruitful and
yeah,
meaningful way? And then after that, I would say approach all discrimination grounds equally with intention and with a system. Do we have a meaningful mapping systems that cover all seven discrimination grounds? If not, why? Give me your logic behind this. Because in Sweden today, we have, sometimes we can take Stockholm, for instance, where 30% of the Swedes in Stockholm, they are in a visible minority. We can tell from their physical appearance that they have another background. So we're living in a Sweden that is diverse. Donnie, you were talking about it in the beginning. We're already there. So we cannot talk about creating diverse spaces because Sweden is already there, but that is not reflected in our organizations, and that is an equality issue. So why are we not monitoring this? That is my question. And I would say the third one is to be transparent and communicate the results of the mappings. Engage your employees and engage your colleagues, and try to problematize the eventual results, and how can we systematically set goals that are relevant for our place. So I would say be open and communicate what does diversity mean for us. Approach all grounds of discrimination with intent and systematically, equally, and then also be transparent and communicate the results and set relevant and meaningful goals and get going.
That's three good tips there. We might also have some graphics for those tips in a little while here. Thank you, but I'm not going to let you go off the hook that easily. You also said something there that I know is kind of a sensitive thing to talk about, and I see so many organizations that are talking about we want to be an inclusive organization. You just said that inclusion. If you say, I mean, as you say, the logic of that means that we in here are opening our arms to you out there. And it still puts them in a position of being, we decide. And so I mean, I like the way you take that, the concept of inclusion that people are using, and maybe not always the right way.
Yeah, because these are concepts of power. Being the norm or being the in group is about being in a position of power. So when it comes to inclusion, that idea just reinforces structures of power. So being in the norm or being in the in group and taking a noble decision about including other is just another way of reinforcing a power relation. So for me, equality when it comes to power is about equal distribution, equal distribution to resources, and to having a voice, or just having the opportunities to create your own destiny. So I would say inclusion when it comes to power is a problematic concept. So I would rather say work for equality and diversity.
Yep. I mean, we could probably spend the rest of the day talking about this. I know we could, because we have before. I know that. Let's get into some questions here as well. There's a long one here from Luis. Wow, Luis Fredin. Hi, I'm a student in human rights studies, and I'm currently writing my final thesis. The thesis is analyzing the gender integration program Jämställdhetsintegration i myndigheter. That was running from 2013-20, which you probably are familiar with. I'm analyzing it through the concept of intersectionality and trying to see what is lacking to actually achieve equality for all, as it sets out to do. I was just wondering if you have something to say in regards to this problem. Maybe I think we run out of text there. Comments on this?
Yes, jämställdhetsintegrering. How do you say it in English? I think some kind of gender equality integrational.
The gender integration program. Yeah, the gender integration program. Yeah.
Which is in the core, it's about asking critical questions before we take any decisions, or before we insert any type of action or measure. So when it comes to gender equality, we're asking critical questions before. How will this affect women? How will this policy affect women in the workforce and such? And I would say I would say that my point of view here is that we need to go from gender equality to talk about all 7 gender all equality,
Yeah.
all grounds for discrimination. Sorry.
Yeah.
So then we're talking about implementing equality instead of just gender equality. So I would say that what is lacking in this Swedish model for gender equality is the broader concept of intersectionality, meaning that you have different equality aspects on the table at the same time. Some people call it the horizontal approach, that you have different aspects that you're taking into account at the same time.
Yeah.
So when we are stating these critical questions before we take on a policy or an action, we need to ask ourselves, how will this policy affect women? How will this policy affect people with different abilities? How will this policy affect employees with different skin color? So critical questions in beforehand, but with different perspectives at the same time. So I would say we need to expand that integration system.
You're a star. Such a star you are. Kate, how can those within an organization, those who might not be in a leadership position, become part of a company's mission to be more diverse and inclusive? That's a good question, Kate. Thank you.
Yes, I would say that we have unions is one way of pressuring and setting the demands for a more including and how to say nuanced work with diversity in the workspace. But there are also different projects and initiatives that are working to equip and help organizations to take on action when it comes to active measures regarding all 7 discriminatory grounds. I would advise you to Google Vidga normen I praktiken, which is a project that is financed by European Social Fund. That actually equips organizations and employees to work with active measures and equality for all 7 discrimination grounds.
And what you just said in Swedish was more or less widen the perspective of the equality norm, right? That was the EU project, yeah. Louise coming back saying, thank you so much for sharing your thoughts, both of you. Well, thank you, Louise. Thank you for being a part and asking the question. We're heading up to, we're almost out of coffee. I don't want to spend too much time of people's time here, and especially not my guests' very, very valuable time. But we will end off with the graphics, the guests' top 3 tips. So today we've talked about them before, Salem's top 3 tips for starting to work with equality and diversity in a more structured way. We have Salem's top tip. Number 1 is, as you said, challenge and concretize. Could you please just expand that a bit more?
Yes. What do we mean by diversity? Who are we including and why? I would say that is the first question.
Okay. Wonderful. Tip number 2. Systemize and monitor.
Yes. So we need to, when we have set a structure for what diversity means and we have a common understanding of it, for hopefully the 7 grounds for discrimination, we need to find meaningful categories to enable us to make comparisons and put them in a system of mapping and evaluation so we can monitor this.
And having done that, number 3, communicate and set goals.
Yes, we have to be transparent with the result and communicate them in an efficient and pedagogic way, and thereafter set relevant and efficient goals towards promoting equal opportunities and rights and combat discrimination in the workforce, for instance.
Fantastic. Salem Yohannes, top 3 tips for working with diversity and equality in the workplace. Not only the workplace, but everywhere. Really, really cool. Thank you so much for the discussion. We have, let's see, I'll put your website there again. SalemYohannes.com. Check her out. She is such a star if you haven't already understood that. And I am so happy that you spent a half an hour with me having coffee. It's been, wonderful. Thank you.
Thank
And it's
you.
Been so much now. Go do. No, but seriously, this is like, opening a whole new door for many people when it comes to, they've just understood the concept of male, female, and maybe scratching on the surface for people who don't look like we do. Now that we have 20% in Sweden, at least, that don't, the whole thing. But we have so far to go. We're not there yet, but now we know what to do. If nothing else, thanks to you. Thank you for being a part of this.
Thank you.
Have a great day, and I'll see you out there somewhere very soon. Take care.
Take care.
Bye. Bye for now.
Bye.